Sometimes, the danger doesn't lie in a thunderstorm or a mechanical failure. Sometimes, it's in the clearest air you've ever seen. On March 5, 1966, BOAC Flight 911 took off from Haneda Airport in Tokyo on a perfectly clear day. There were no clouds, no signs of bad weather. The passengers, on a relaxed flight, admired Mount Fuji from their windows. What exactly happened in that clear sky? March 5, 1966, Haneda International Airport, Tokyo, Japan. It's 1:30 in the afternoon, and here, BOAC Flight 911 is waiting to continue its route to its final destination in Hong Kong. Flight 911 wasn't simply a journey between Tokyo and Hong Kong. It was part of a long international route that connected the United Kingdom with Southeast Asia, at a time when direct intercontinental flights were still technically unfeasible and operationally expensive. The itinerary began at London Heathrow, where the Boeing 707 took off toward Dorval Airport in Montreal, Canada, the first stopover. From there, it crossed the continent to San Francisco International Airport on the west coast of the United States. It then continued its route across the Pacific, stopping in Honolulu, Hawaii, before arriving in Tokyo, Japan, its second-to-last stop. The final leg would take the plane from Haneda Airport in Tokyo to Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong, the flight's final destination. A multi-day journey with several stopovers in the style of air travel of the time, where each stop was used to refuel, perform basic maintenance, and change or add passengers. The segment between Tokyo and Hong Kong was approximately 5 hours long. That day, the Boeing 707 was scheduled to take off southwest from runway 33L at Haneda, fly over the southern part of the Japanese archipelago, and then cross into the East China Sea until reaching its destination in the then British colony. The aircraft involved in this flight was a Boeing 707-436 with registration GAPFE. This model was a narrow-body, four-engine jet, part of the first generation of commercial jets. The 707 had revolutionized international air travel since its introduction and was capable of flying at speeds close to 590 miles per hour, with intercontinental range thanks to its four Rolls-Royce Conway engines. The airline operating Flight 911 was BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, the leading British international airline between 1939 and 1974. It was formed through the merger of Imperial Airways and British Airways Ltd, and for decades represented the face of British aviation abroad. It operated a diverse fleet that included iconic models such as the de Havilland Comet, the Vickers VC-10, and the Boeing 707. In 1974, BOAC merged with British European Airways to form the present-day British Airways, ceasing to exist as an independent entity. On board the Boeing 707 were 113 passengers, most of them American nationals. A large group of employees from the Thermo King Corporation, based in Minnesota, stood out. These workers and their families were on an incentive trip through Asia as a reward for their performance. At the controls of Flight 911 was 45-year-old Eric W. Dobson, an experienced British pilot with years of service on international flights. Dobson had a solid reputation and was familiar with the route between Tokyo and Hong Kong. He had accumulated a total of 14,724 flight hours, 2,155 of which were on 707 aircraft. Accompanying him were First Officer Edward Maloney, 33 years old, with a total of 3,663 hours of experience. Second Officer Terence Anderson, also 33, and Flight Engineer Ian Carter, 31. Completing the crew were 7 flight attendants responsible for attending to the passengers during the journey. At 1:50 p.m., 1 hour after landing, the Boeing 707 begins pushback from the Haneda terminal. As they taxi past the runway, passengers uneasily observe the still smoldering wreckage of the DC-8 that had crashed the day before, Canadian Pacific Flight 402, which resulted in 64 fatalities during a failed landing attempt. Minutes later, Flight 911 lines up on runway 33L. These were some of the darkest days for Japanese aviation. In less than a month, there had been 3 air accidents in the Tokyo area. The aforementioned Flight 402, All Nippon Airways Flight 60, which crashed into Tokyo Bay on approach to Haneda, and a military helicopter crash that left 4 dead. At 1:58 p.m., the BOAC 707 begins accelerating down the runway. They lifted off without issue and set course for Hong Kong. According to the approved flight plan, the plane was supposed to make a 40-degree right turn after takeoff to head directly south toward Hong Kong. However, the captain, aware of the exceptional visibility and the iconic landscape, requested a slight deviation from the flight plan to make a visual pass near Mount Fuji. The tower approved the request. The decision, motivated by a desire to offer the passengers an unforgettable experience, would mark the beginning of a fatal chain of events. As the 707 climbed, one of the passengers filmed with an 8mm camera. The footage shows images of the airport and the mountainous landscape. The aircraft reached 17,000 feet. In the cockpit, everything was normal. Captain Dobson began a gentle descent to approach the eastern face of Mount Fuji, seeking the optimal viewing angle for the passengers. The silhouette of Mount Fuji stood majestically against the blue sky. It was a perfect image. But beneath that peaceful appearance, the volcano was generating an invisible phenomenon, a mountain wave, an atmospheric wave caused by strong winds crossing over the summit. In less than a second, the plane enters an area of intense vertical turbulence. There is no warning, no clouds. The wind strikes from below and the sides with tremendous force. The Boeing experiences an acceleration of at least plus 7.5 G. Some passengers die instantly due to the brutality of the gravitational shift, especially those who were not wearing seatbelts. The camera that was recording skips 2 frames due to the overload, then shows blurry images of the cabin interior before stopping completely. It is physical and visual evidence of the exact moment the aircraft's structure begins to fail. The first component to give way is the vertical tail. The rudder is torn off violently, striking the left stabilizer and breaking it as well. The plane becomes suddenly unstable and pitches upward abruptly and violently. At that moment, all 4 engines detach from the wings, one after another. Without control or lift, the plane begins to break apart in midair. From the ground, near Gotemba, numerous witnesses observe an unreal scene, a commercial airliner plummeting, spinning, trailing smoke, shedding parts and debris. Some onlookers capture the fall with their cameras. Bodies can be seen being ejected from the fuselage along with clothing, suitcases, and pieces of cabin furniture. The Boeing, now completely out of control, enters a flat spin, twirling like a dry leaf, rapidly losing altitude. More sections of the wings break off, and the forward cabin, along with the front rows of seats, separates entirely from the rest of the fuselage. Some debris is scattered as far as 10 miles, 16 kilometers, from the final impact site, which occurs on a wooded slope on the outskirts of Mount Fuji. In less than 3 minutes from the first encounter with the turbulence, Flight 911 has been completely destroyed. No one on board survives. What had happened? How could turbulence bring down a giant like the 707? The investigation was led by Japanese authorities, with participation from the United Kingdom and technical observers from Boeing and the FAA. The first finding was that there were no survivors and that the wreckage was extraordinarily scattered. The extent of the structural collapse was clear from the start. The plane had not crashed as a whole, but had broken apart in the air. The main challenge was the lack of flight data. The 707's FDR was located in the cockpit, a common configuration in early models. Upon impact, the cockpit caught fire, and the device was completely destroyed. The aircraft did not carry a CVR, as it was not required at the time. Faced with the lack of records, investigators turned to several unconventional methods. One of them was the analysis of a film recorded by a passenger on board. That tape, recovered from the wreckage, proved to be essential. By analyzing the camera and the skipped frames at the moment of turbulence, it was determined that the force experienced exceeded plus 7.5 G. That load alone was enough to explain the loss of the vertical stabilizer and the subsequent breakup. But there was more. During the search operations, a U.S. military A-4 Skyhawk, patrolling the same mountain area, accidentally flew into the same turbulence. The pilot reported experiencing forces between -4G and plus 9G. He barely managed to regain control, and his account was key in confirming the hypothesis that the Boeing 707 had encountered an extremely violent, invisible, and deadly air rotation. Additionally, wind tunnel tests were conducted using a scale model of the terrain. The results confirmed that Mount Fuji, with its isolated shape and considerable height, generated rotor zones on its leeward side. Simulations showed that these zones could reach up to 16,000 feet in altitude and extend up to 20 kilometers from the summit. Flight 911 had flown right through that area. As for the aircraft's structure, fatigue cracks were identified in the tail during the post-accident analysis. But experts concluded that these fissures were not related to the catastrophic breakup. The final conclusion was that the aircraft had fallen victim to severe clear air turbulence caused by a mountain wave, and that the structure was not designed to withstand such extreme vertical loads. The crash was officially deemed an act of God in legal and technical terms. Surprisingly, the official Japanese report did not include operational recommendations on how to prevent similar future tragedies. No changes were mandated for flight plans, nor were there altitude or route restrictions near Mount Fuji on windy days. There were also no immediate recommendations for improving aircraft instrumentation to detect this type of turbulence. However, the industry did take notice. After the Flight 911 accident, airlines began prohibiting sightseeing deviations that involved flying over mountains simply for visual enjoyment. The tragedy also prompted the mandatory installation of data and voice recorders and strengthened meteorological training for pilots. The case of BOAC 911 was a tragic turning point. An accident without human error or mechanical failure. A case where the enemy was invisible, unpredictable, and brutal. Although mountain waves have continued to pose a threat to general aviation, especially in mountainous regions, not a single commercial accident due to this phenomenon has been recorded since 1966. And it is this, along with several other elements of the case, that over the years have fueled unconfirmed theories that invite doubt, or at least curiosity. One of the first striking issues is the extraordinary chain of accidents in Japan during that month. 4 air tragedies, 3 involving commercial aircraft, occurred in just 30 days in the same area. A statistical coincidence? Or a reflection of deeper problems in Japanese aviation at the time? Another point of suspicion is the fact that since 1966, there has not been a single commercial accident caused by a mountain wave. While the phenomenon is real and continues to affect general aviation, it's surprising that only one commercial aircraft has ever disintegrated from this specific cause, and it happened during an unscheduled deviation from the approved flight plan. Some wonder whether it truly was a mountain wave, or if something else happened in that clear sky. Then there's the group of 75 Americans from Thermo King Corporation on board. An unusual concentration of employees from a single company, on a single flight, who vanished with nothing left but scattered wreckage. While there's no indication of a conspiracy, some have speculated about industrial or geopolitical interests without any concrete basis. Added to all this is the mystery of the 8mm videotape recovered after the crash. A unique piece of evidence recorded from inside the plane at the moment of the breakup that has never been released or shared with the public. What exactly can be seen in those images? Just sky and carpet, or something more? Finally, the official Japanese report surprised many with its lack of depth. It included no recommendations on meteorology or deviations from flight plans, limiting itself to mentioning structural cracks that were later dismissed as irrelevant. For some, it was too convenient a closure for a case that was far too uncomfortable. There is no evidence to support any conspiracy theory. But Flight 911 remains a case where mystery, context, and coincidence fuel the imagination, and remind us that even in aviation, some stories don't truly end when the reports are closed. There is a memorial dedicated to BOAC Flight 911 in Japan. It is located on the slopes of Mount Fuji, near the city of Gotemba, in Shizuoka Prefecture. This monument honors the 124 people who lost their lives in the March 5, 1966 accident. The memorial consists of a white triangular structure, accompanied by a brick wall at the entrance. In the back, there are plaques with information about the accident, although the victims' names are not included. Thank you for joining me on March 5, 1966, when a BOAC Boeing 707 with 124 people on board took off from Tokyo bound for Hong Kong on a perfect day, only to vanish in seconds before the majestic Mount Fuji. A journey that was meant to be the continuation of an unforgettable vacation ended in a tragedy that seemed inexplicable at the time. There were no human errors, no mechanical failures, just an invisible, undetectable, and devastating force of nature. The decision to offer a view cost lives. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel, feel free to leave a like, share this video, or subscribe. It's free and helps me keep creating this content for you. If this case impacted you and you want to dive deeper, these sources will be helpful. BOAC Flight 911, compiled by Frederick P. Miller, Agnes F. Van Dome, and John McBroster. This book offers a compilation of information about Flight 911, including technical and contextual details of the accident. Air Disaster, Volume 1 by MacArthur Job. This volume includes a chapter dedicated to Flight 911, with detailed analysis and graphics illustrating the sequence of the accident. Dealing with Disaster in Japan by Christopher P. Hood. Although it focuses on Flight JL123, this book offers insight into how Japan has handled air disasters, providing useful context about the country's aviation safety culture. See you next Friday in a new video.